Hello and welcome. Today is the 23rd of February, and you are currently listening to the fourth episode of the Critical Conversation podcast, where it is our mind to examine political and cultural issues critically. Now, similar to last week's episode, we have another very intelligent guest with us here today. We have Jeremy Hollahan. Hello, Jeremy.
Gentlemen.
You can follow Jeremy on Twitter and Instagram through the links in the description. Now, we brought Jeremy in today to discuss with us our topics for this week. This is a current political issue, and one that he's especially keen on is two things, both proposed by Democrats: Medicare for all and student debt forgiveness. I'm sure Jeremy has insights into the student loan forgiveness topic, especially as he is currently attending Westchester University for accounting and finance. So he understands what these people are really pitching for. Right.
Okay, so thanks for coming on. First of all, it was so we're gonna start off in the Medicare for all discussion. This is you have some information that you can share with us.
So thanks for having me, guys. So Medicare for all is just a social idea that's often based on the philosophy that healthcare is a universal human right, which in itself is up for debate. But the fundamental idea is that all citizens of the country that adopt this policy would have free access to a universal government-facilitated health care. Now, around 18 countries have adopted this kind of policy, the most famous ones being the United Kingdom and Canada. So just to get a good definition of what Medicare for all is exactly, I don't usually use or go to WebMD, but I found a good rough and ready definition. It says, the Medicare for all plan from Bernie Sanders would create a single national health care insurance plan for every American, managed and paid for by the federal government. The plan builds on Medicare, the popular national health insurance program for Americans 65 and older and for younger people who are disabled. And so the idea of having universal healthcare is not exactly a new idea. Universal coverage systems have been showing up in European countries, honestly, since the 70s. Now, obviously, the systems differ slightly by country, but they all have the same fundamental principles, which is a universal public healthcare system that is paid and managed by the government.
Right. So why is that such a popular idea with them as opposed to?
Well, it mainly comes down, I think, when it comes to the popularity of it. It's it is a little more socialist leaning with it, but it's an idea of, I think it mainly stems from, the idea that we should be giving to people who can't have for themselves, which is a noble idea, but I don't really think going through the government is the best way to achieve that. There are other methods to give to those less fortunate, and I think we get really dangerous road once you start giving more and more to the government. For example, recently in the UK, there was a news article that came out that they were denying people health care, or planning to at least, based on whether or not they were racist or homophobic. Now, that's a very difficult thing to define.
Right.
Things like hate speech. So denying people health care based on their opinions is incredibly authoritarian, and that's what happens when you give too much power to one entity.
It's a claim of tolerance, but then the only thing that they don't tolerate is intolerance. So I believe we have just a few questions that we compiled for Jeremy, which he prepared answers for. So we can just jump right into those.
We already talked about what Medicare for all is. Do you know any of the supposed benefits to Medicare for all?
So the primary goal of making healthcare, affordable or free for everyone, is the fact that it can give people who are poor and underprivileged access to a universal healthcare and not have to go to places either not afford to go to places or go to places that are not up to quality or up to code. Now, in the United States, in this case, this healthcare is planned to be free.
Right.
Which I can expand on later. But the front-running benefit is that those who cannot afford healthcare will actually have access to quality healthcare. And so, according to theory, the theory of this Medicare for all idea, the people who already can afford healthcare would still save money. But secondly, it's claimed by people who propose the universal healthcare system that the United States would save roughly $500 billion a year after fully adopting this system. And in a lot of ways, another potential benefit is that could rid a lot of the complications that Americans have currently with health insurance charges, conditions, and a lot of problems that people run into with insurance companies as related to healthcare.
Yeah, I think a really big issue with proposing Medicare for all is that it's really just a one-size-fits-all. In America's current climate where you can choose your own healthcare, people get to choose what fits them best and what policies they need and what suits them. But under this proposed plan, it would really just be an assembly line production.
Which, while potentially more efficient in the sense that it's probably going to end up being cheaper overall as costs go, it does not. It won't fit everyone the same way, and that's not exactly what we need when it comes to healthcare. Something so important. As you know, there are people who have the ability to pay more, and I don't see why they should not be allowed to pay more.
Right.
Because the thing is with Medicare for all is there a lot of them, especially Bernie Sanders suggested eliminating private healthcare, which would mean that you have to take the government version over over being able to pay for your own.
Yeah, just to put it in more relatable terms, say everyone, obviously you can just go to Walmart if you want a specific type of shirt or pants, you can just buy it. This would be like the government coming in and saying every person has to wear a size 32 medium shirt or whatever.
So
and
this plain tan brown shirt, nothing special. No customization.
Oh, but it's great because it's free, right?
Yeah, it's great because it's free.
But no, because that's not what you want. It's not what you wear. So you should have the choice to go and select what fits you best.
Now there are some candidates. I believe Warren said that she will not abolish private health care, but still allow you to keep it if you so. You keep your own private health care if you want. But even still, it's then you're being taxed to pay for both your own health care and the health care for others. Even though some people might be much less in fit than you, and thus requiring more, they're going to be pulling from it more than you will, so you won't see any of the benefits, but you'll still be paying in, which is not exactly preferable for most people.
Yeah, a good analogy would be like the school system. So we have the public education system that we do now, yet there are countless amounts of private schools that many parents send their kids to. If we did eliminate private healthcare, it'd be like getting rid of all private schools and forcing everyone to use the public education system.
Right, which I think we can agree is really not the best option.
Because as all of us have used private schooling, so we can all agree we like the school we go to. We don't want to have to be forced to take part in public schooling.
Yeah. Right. Now something like that would never happen because the Supreme Court did declare that parents have a right of sending their children where they see the education is best. So Medicare for all, I do agree that a lot of the intentions are good, but I believe a lot of people advocating for it have not considered a lot of the, not just the downsides, but a lot of the unintended consequences that could come out of it. Because right off the bat, the first issue is obviously the financing. So in an ideal society or one with autonomous resources, this idea would be excellent. It would be a no-brainer. But as we know, resources and finances are scarce. So the funding for all this would have to come out of someone's pocket.
Right.
The other downside is the unpredictability. The current idea that's being pushed in this country, specifically by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, it has a very ready, fire, aim aura to it. Sanders himself said when he was asked about the projected cost of this policy, he literally said, and I quote, "You don't know, nobody knows, this is impossible to predict." Now, many make claims that this system would work well in this country, considering it, for the most part, has worked well in other European countries. But the biggest thing they fail to take into account is the fact that we have a population of almost 330 million, as opposed to these European countries, which have populations of, I think all of them are under 100 million.
Yeah, or like England, I believe, is 80 million, and Canada is just over 100 million.
Yeah, I
So
think
it's-
people that really try and base their arguments, and there are some that do this, that base their arguments based off of how it works for other countries, is really just comparing apples and oranges.
But it's also you gotta call into question: does it really work all that well?
Right.
For example, I was just reading a story about a man who he had an infection in his tooth. Now he submitted a form. I believe this was in Canada. He submitted a form that
I think it was actually the United Kingdom.
Yeah, it was one of the two. It was a country that had Medicare for all, and there were a few of them. But he needed to get it pulled, so he submitted a form, and after 18 months of waiting, he just pulled it himself. Which in America, if you have dental problems, you just call up your dentist, make an appointment in the next couple of weeks. Sure, it's not cheap, but you get it in a few weeks, and you get a high quality product.
Right. Which leads back to the point that free Medicare care is not good Medicare. It's just free, basically.
It's gonna lower the costs for everyone. That's true, but it's also going to lower the quality of it.
And it's going to raise taxes as well.
Well, yes, that too.
Yeah, so I know. So Elizabeth Warren, her plan for Medicare for all is slightly different. I personally think it's better than Sanders' plan because hers is actually a lot more framed. Sanders is very much the idea of like let's just do it and figure out how we'll do it after we initiate it. Warren actually has somewhat of a legitimate plan. However, her estimate of how much this would cost is coming in around $20.5 trillion. And that would all have to be in new federal spending over the next decade. There are other sources that say it costs more. Some say it costs less, but it comes in just around that. So, like a study from the Urban Institute and the Commonwealth Fund, both highly credited information organizations, they found that the plan would cost roughly over $32 trillion in federal funds. So this is extremely hard to predict. There's a very broad spectrum of how much this could cost, which could be dangerous because we may not know exactly what we're getting into.
Right, I think that's one dangerous thing about just their plan to jump right in, like you said, ready, fire, aim. It's just you don't run a country based off of just what you project to work, and you just say, oh, we'll go for it, and then just hope it all works out. It's not the way things should work.
Yeah, and as you were saying earlier with it, once something becomes, like free is not always the best. That's the other major downside is that healthcare, once you make it free, it can become very inefficient and lose a lot of its value. So in free markets, when there's perfect competition, when the market's in equilibrium, people always get the best quality and the lowest prices.
Right.
Obviously, there are the exceptions of monopolies, but that doesn't really apply in this case.
It doesn't happen very often.
But for the majority of goods, when there's perfect competition, the prices are kept low and the quality is kept high. Now, making healthcare universally free would easily make it lose value. And as you were saying, that, like, for example, there was that man in the UK who had to pull his own tooth after waiting 18 months. And according to Health Watch Cornwall, they're a county health watchdog for the United Kingdom. They're saying that some people have been waiting for more than 3 years to register with a dentist.
Right.
So that's kind of the major problem that could come out of it. These facilities could get overloaded also depending on their location. And like we were having here.
Instead of being just evenly dispersed among smaller private organizations.
Correct. Another thing, this is in a lot of ways just a personal view of mine, but when you study the majority of the practices of the government, it a lot of times can come through as very inefficient, and so I personally would not want that group being in charge of my healthcare.
Right.
An example of this is, a friend of mine at school is from India, and she has applied for a green card. However, the green card application has been in processing for years now, and so I go to that as just a classic example of how slow the government is with processing a lot of things, and a lot of times healthcare has to be urgent. And so if you have something that could be potentially urgent going into that sort of like mentality, that group, it could cause a lot of problems, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really just good point to note that if you want quality, free is not the way to go pretty much ever.
And
Definitely.
usually, when there's a high cost, it incentivizes the company providing the service to do it better and to do it faster to get as many customers as possible. Right now, a lot of hospitals are trying to be as efficient as possible to make the most money. Now, that's not obviously making the money isn't the best thing, the most important thing in the world, but the fact that they're trying does mean that they have attempted to be as efficient as possible with their costs, and so it does mean that in the U.S. you can get healthcare rather quickly, and yeah, I mean you can go to an ER and or even like an urgent care. You can go to an urgent care, privately owned stuff, and get it right away, and for even much cheaper. Urgent care is much cheaper than ER.
Yeah. So urgent cares have been a somewhat recent thing, but a lot more of them are popping up now because, and again, this goes back to the competition in a free market. Everyone knows that the emergency room many times, no matter what you go for, is going to cost a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So now there have been these small private urgent cares that have been popping up. I know of at least 3 in this local area where you can go for something that you need urgent care for, but is not something as serious like, let's say, a broken femur. You're not
Yeah.
in critical condition, but you need you need urgent medical assistance.
Yeah, you got a bad cut, but it's not bad enough that it doesn't appear fatal, but it's still you got to get it checked out. You got to get it got work done. So you go to an urgent care, or you get the flu and you want to go get antibiotics or something. You go to the urgent care just because it's generally cheaper, and in some cases there's an urgent care closer to my house than there is the hospital, so it's faster and cheaper to go there.
Yeah, generally, emergency room trips can cost in the thousands, but most trips to an urgent care will cost you under $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's for stitches, meds, anything like that.
Yeah, it's generally a little more. So it's cheaper and it seems to be more effective. I think that versus the larger hospitals, many of which are government subsidized and have a lot more regulations in them, and it just costs more despite that.
Right. Now, another thing that we wanted to touch into for our topic today is the concept and proposal of student loan forgiveness. So, Jeremy, if you could tell us a little bit about that proposed plan.
So there's a lot of different versions of it that have been proposed, but the general idea. So currently in the U.S., if I'm correct, compiling all debt that is owed currently, student loan debt, it comes out to roughly 1.6 trillion.
Yeah, that's just about right.
Which, to put in perspective, is about 22 times the budget for the Department of Education.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not exactly a small obstacle to maneuver around. Now there's been different plans such as, forgive everyone up to 50,000, forgive everyone up to 10,000, things such as that. And so the philosophy behind that is honestly hard for me to pinpoint. I understand that we want to help people who are stuck in places where, in this example, they owe lots of money in debt. But the issue that goes in hand is, again, with the Medicare for All, is all of this has to come out of someone's pocket. The banks and people who gave out those loans aren't just going to say, you don't owe it anymore. Obviously, they're going to want something. And again, like we were saying with Medicare, it has to come out of someone's pocket.
Right. Nothing really comes at no price to no one.
Yeah, college is there are a few things for those who want to go to college. You don't have to be heavily in debt. A lot of the people who are campaigning for it, I've seen ads of a woman who was a history major, who was a African studies history major, who was $110,000 in debt, and primarily the reason is because she chose to go to a very expensive school out of state. So usually, from what I've seen, there are just a few simple things that you can do to just avoid heavy debt, and one of them is decide whether you actually want to go to college or not before you go. So if you're not sure what you want to do, I would not recommend going to college and just figuring it out while you're there, because that's one of the largest economic decisions of your life, and to just make it up while you're there. There's one thing if you go there and you discover something you didn't know before and you find out this is what I want to do, but you should at least know what you want to do before you go there, so you're actually going and spending your money wisely. Another thing is you can avoid going to college, because honestly, the supply and demand, the less of demand there is, and the more of the supply, the price will go down. So obviously, if we stop people from going, like right now, most people are told to go to college by parents, by teachers, and it doesn't always pay off. There are a lot of people who go into college, get a degree, come out, and make less than they would if they had just gone to tech school, or even gone straight and find an internship at a business and started out like that. More options, just staying locally, looking for a local school that you can commute to. It saves a lot. For example, Westchester, if you're coming out of state, it's $30,000 per year. If you're in state, it's $20,000 a year if you're staying on campus, and if you're commuting, it's $10,000 per year. So right there, if you were in another state and you decide to go out of state and stay on another campus, it would cost you 3 times what it would if you've been local and commuting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And the other problem that I see with the student loan forgiveness is the fact that it doesn't affect, 2 things. One, it doesn't affect everyone in this country. Not everyone has been through college. Not everyone has debt. Number 2, like you were saying, they were not forced to go to college. Yes, there was obviously a very big economic and social stigma to go, a lot of social pressure, but they were not forced to go. And so a lot of ways they agreed to taking on this debt and paying that expensive amount of money to for a higher education.
Yeah, the school. It's not like the school doesn't tell you how much it costs per year. They tell you up front before you go, this is how much we're charging.
So it's not like you're going for college and then going,
right.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know that I now had to carry this cost.
It's not like you go to college and they don't tell you how much it costs until you're done, and they're like, okay, so this was actually $100,000 per year.
Right.
No, before you go, you're told. It's so now you're forcing people who didn't go to college to pay for people who chose to spend money.
A selective amount of people that went to college, they have their loan forgiveness, but that cost isn't on the government. That cost is on now everybody, even those, like you said, that choose to just
or even
not go
those
to college.
Who chose to go to a local college, commute, and have a job while they're in college, pay off their debts. There are people who, get what they need to get done, and they end up coming out of college with basically no debt, and then they pay that off right away. So now they're forced to pay for somebody who did not take the same decisions they did, who didn't work the same amount of hours they did to earn up that money, and it's the whole idea of equality of outcome versus equality of opportunity.
Exactly, and that's what capitalism versus socialism is really all about, is that it's not about giving people free things, it's about giving them the opportunity to thrive on their own.
Exactly.
So it's really, capitalism is a harnessing of greed, and it's taking it, and it's basically giving someone the ability, like basically taking someone like Elon Musk or Bill Gates and saying, if you really have the drive and motivation to work and
there's
do all
also
this.
An element of, there's also, sorry to interrupt, there's also an element of, some people are born with higher IQs than others, and that gives them slight advantage, and born in the right area and stuff.
But that's not controllable by society. They're going
exactly.
Well, and to be fair, you could argue that the IQ itself has value. So this comes from, I believe this was a thought experiment from the philosopher Robert Nozick. But back when Wilt Chamberlain was was a huge basketball star, he demanded more pay from his team because whenever he played games, more people would come, more tickets would be bought, and so he argued that was because of him, and therefore he should be paid more. And the question there is can he demand a higher pay than his teammates for his playing? And when you look at it, a lot of times the answer is yes, because his talent therefore has value, and he can use that value to his advantage.
Right. It's not just like every player just gets the same amount no matter what they put out or what they put into things.
And where that comes from is there's 3 basic ideas of justice when it comes to distributing social goods. The first is justice is equality, which is pretty straightforward. That's giving in a situation, okay, let's say everyone gets the same size slice of pizza. To use pizza as an example. Then there's need-based justice, where we'll say, okay, this person, because they need more, will get 2. This person will get 1.
Right.
And then the final one, which is most prominent, in at least capitalist and Western societies is an idea of merit-based justice, which is when it really gets down to it, is you get what you work for.
Which is really a good policy to have, because in general, like I said, it allows the individual to thrive if they really have the motivation to do so.
Yeah, and so going back to the fairness of the student loan forgiveness, in this point, it's going to a need-based justice, which when it comes to taxing can be very, very unfair, because if you're taxing everyone the same amount to give money to a certain amount of people who, in this case, need to forgive debt, that is extremely unfair to people who either, one, worked extremely hard to pay off their loan debt up to this point.
Now they have to take on the debt of others.
Exactly, after paying off their own. And secondly, people who specifically avoided college knowing the increased cost that would have.
But
and
now
they're paying for it
but now
anyway.
they're bearing the cost for other people.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and one thing that seems interesting is that a lot of this, especially in Warren's plan, the free tuition, it really targets people who seem to be wanting to climb the corporate ladder, because especially among her and Bernie Sanders, there's this common hatred for the top 1%, top 5% of earners, which is, just for some context, in America, individuals who make $1 million or so a year. Which is frankly strange for Warren and Sanders to be fighting against this, since they are the ones they're claiming to fight the 1%, and yet they have respectively $12 million and $3 million, and Bernie Sanders owns 3 houses.
It's okay though. It's okay though. He needs that summer home, guys. It's just a summer home. Right? Everybody has one of those, right?
Yeah, I believe he and Mike
one?
Bloomberg sparred over that in the recent debate. But
to get back on topic, it is now, if the problem is there are some countries where they actually do some payback. I'm blanking on the names, but I have heard of some nations where they pay back certain career paths that people choose, certain fields such as engineering and other things. And even in the U.S., you can get a lot of your debt forgived through military service. There are programs like ROTC, which you can use to help pay off your college debts, and in exchange you serve in the military. But even then, you're still paying for it. You're just paying for it with service rather than out of pocket with cash.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and unfortunately, the go-to solution for a lot of these policies is just increased taxes, and a lot of times it's increased taxes on the rich. And so this solution's kind of been put forth for both Medicare for all and repaying loan debt. And the biggest issue with that, one of the most inherent issues with that, is that they, in a lot of ways, treat the 1% as some kind of asset. We don't own them. There's nothing really forcing them to live in this country. A lot of them could just easily pick up and leave, and as soon as they wanted to, or move their entire companies to outsourcing locations. So proposing these massive taxes on the rich could just make them prepare to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And the other issue, I know Sanders proposed this when it came to forgiving loan debt, was increasing taxes in the trading of stocks and bonds, which would be a serious problem, because that could, depending on how people are feeling, that could easily tank the market. So, for example, in a scenario, let's say Sanders is promising to raise taxes on trading of stocks and bonds. If he got elected, as the next president, the market would tank, because everyone would want to sell and get all of their solidified assets that are in stocks and bonds out of there before the tax increases.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be trading stocks if it's going to cost me extra money and I might lose out.
And to those who don't know, stocks and bonds are already taxed. There's already a tax on the trading of stocks and bonds. But Sanders wants to increase them now to manage to pay for student loan debt.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous idea. Now, I can understand there are some people who are suffering genuinely. They didn't know how serious the problem would be until afterwards, because they were told their whole life, you'll go to college, you'll get a good job, you'll be able to pay it off.
Correct.
Because for their parents, that was true. But as of late, the cost of tuition has been skyrocketing exponentially, and the average wages have not been going up to match that.
Well, and just kind of to just kind of sum a lot of this up there with that, with just the idea of like we're forgiving debt. When we were saying, no one forced them to go. Jobs like goods have markets, and what happened is there was a massive wave, of a generation that went through college and occupied all those jobs that had high demands. So now a lot of people are going and getting degrees that nowadays do not have high demand.
Yeah.
And therefore are not, there aren't a lot of openings and they aren't paying high. Now, this has had an opposite effect with the trade field. Nowadays, trades such as plumbing, electrical, welding, and mechanics are heavily needed and will pay very, very high if you're experienced in that area.
Yeah, well, I think all this stuff is really important, especially for this upcoming generation to consider as we look into politics and just really society as a whole. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening, and thank you, Jeremy, for coming in today.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we had some really good discussion. Again, you can reach Jeremy by social media through the links in the description. You can subscribe to us here on YouTube. We'd love to hear any thoughts and feedback in the comments. And if you are interested in a guest feature like this one, you can reach out to us for that at thecriticalconversationpodcast@gmail.com. So thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.